March is over, but the madness is not. Here at Sports Scene, we tell you what's hot.
It's Ken and Evan, don't you forget. When we bring you stories, they're nothing but nip.
We're keeping it real colorful here in Studio C at the Julie Chen, Leslie Moonves, and CBS Media Center. Thanks for joining us for another episode.
We spring forward into April with some great sports coming up, Ken.
And the countdown begins for the spring game as only 10 days remain until the Trojans take the field again. But with championship aspirations following the team, practice has been focusing on preparing for anything that may come their way.
We were trying to create some scenarios. I wanted to create some different field goal scenarios and some scenarios with 5 seconds left with the ball on the 3-yard line, things of that nature. I thought our focus defensively took a minute to get going, and then they got going there in the second half of practice.
It's exciting, as a quarterback, to see your team where they were day one spring to where they are now is awesome.
It's going down at the Coliseum on Saturday, April 11th at 3 p.m. And away from the field, the Todd McNair versus NCAA showdown heated up last week as documents were made public. And now we send it over to Evan for a debate on what USC should do next.
Thanks, Ken. We took our studio over here to Studio B to talk about Trojan Horse this week in light of the McNair case that came out a week ago revolving USC and some emails released with the Reggie Bush case a few years back. Jacob, now 5 years removed from the punishment that came down against the Trojans, do you think that the University of Southern California should press charges or create any action against the NCAA?
Well, Evan, I think they really, really should. Obviously, the scholarships and the sanctions have passed, and USC has felt the brunt of that in the last couple of years. But I think, if anything else, it should show that USC is always trying to fight back. Pat Hayden mentioned that he did try to repeal some of USC's sanctions after Penn State had some of their sanctions repealed. But I think that USC should still take action, because even if there's nothing that they can do, even something symbolic like allowing Reggie Bush's Heisman to be reinstated or allowing the national championship that USC won that was removed from the record books to become back into the record books would really do a lot to show that USC isn't going to be pushed around by the NCAA as they were when the NCAA decided to go a little bit overboard with their punishment.
Look, these documents show how ridiculous the investigation was, and Pat Hayden's completely right. The NCAA lacked institutional control in dealing with USC 100%. I mean, it's ridiculous. You have a guy comparing the investigation to the Oklahoma City bombing. They're ripping on Hayden for hiring Kiffin. The whole thing was a farce. But I just don't see the point in reopening the old wound and kind of going back and fighting the NCAA and doing this all over again.
So you're saying that championships won in 2004, Heisman trophies, awards of that nature should not be tried to be given back at all?
I mean, they still won them, and I just don't think the NCAA is going to give them back easily. Emmert already released a statement in response to Pat Hayden where he didn't back down at all in terms of the investigation and the integrity of the investigation. And I don't think it's worth going to court and going through a whole year-long saga to try and deal with something that happened so long ago. The focus should be on the future.
But Jacob, much at the same time, while the players will say that excuses aren't part of the game, certainly the fans and the boosters understand what the implications of this has been. There has to be a part of it where you think that the ramifications still live on.
Absolutely. And last week, Pat Hayden released a statement saying he was strongly denouncing, after those Todd McNair emails were released, strongly denouncing that the NCAA bias that appeared to have happened with USC sanctions, referring to that USC was punished for hiring Lane Kiffin, who had infractions at Tennessee before coming over to coach the Trojans. And I think that USC really wants to show that this would be a perfect way to sort of end the sanctions era. The sanctions are over, but I think that if USC can get that Heisman back, get the championship back, it will really show that there is a happy ending for what's been a pretty terrible situation.
The happy ending is how USC does next year. The best way to get revenge on the NCAA is to win, and really to get back at them by the performance on the field. These players had nothing to do with the sanctions, and bringing this whole issue back again for another year when we have Cody Kessler in his final year as quarterback.
That wraps up this edition of Trojan Horse from Studio B, changing things up this week. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Evan. That was a spirited debate right there. Now, much of the talk around the McNair case focuses on the legal ramifications of the NCAA's actions. I sat down with grad student and practicing lawyer A.J. Lawrence to talk about how the law will play a factor in what happens next in the saga. Can you just break down what legally has gone on so far in the McNair case?
So kind of to give you a gist of it, McNair, we know, filed his lawsuit for breach of contract, defamation, and various kind of torts. And what happened is that the NCAA tried to get the case dismissed by filing what they call as a slap motion, which is pretty much saying you're, McNair coming in trying to, I guess, get in the way of our free speech and our rights, and that would have gotten rid of the case entirely. But what happened is that McNair got to conduct discovery. He got to ask the NCAA to provide documents, to give us interviews, to give us all of this information you had. So McNair got all these great documents in his possession. And when he responded to the NCAA's slap motion, he put all those documents on the record. And those are all these documents that are so big at issue right now because the NCAA was essentially like, no, I don't want this information out there. But because of how the court system works and the public's right to have free access to information, it put all the documents out there. And the NCAA asked the higher court, Court of Appeals, can you stop this? Can you require the documents to be sealed? And the Court of Appeals said no. The public has a right to view the documents and to see them. And the NCAA's desire to keep them hidden and sealed, it didn't supersede the public's right to First Amendment access to the courts.
So, as you mentioned, NCAA, they have a lot of investigations going on. How will this one kind of change the precedent to what happens in the future?
Well, because of what the NCAA, what they did in terms of realizing that they can't put documents into this court case or any court case really and keep them sealed to hide them from the public, it makes them realize that they're exposing every witness who testified, every comment that they're making internally about these investigations. They're exposing those people to be, to public view, essentially. So pretty much witnesses who talk to the NCAA, now they're being exposed and people are going to get to see who these people are, figure out, who the players are and who's making these comments. And so it's going to be an issue for the NCAA moving forward because they're going to realize, hey, people who talk to us, they're going to have to, they'll be exposed essentially. So how they're going to be able to interview and people are going to want to be forthright and to talk about, what they know, it's going to be a challenge.
Their next challenge. And then you said breach of contract, defamation are things that McNair is going after the NCAA. Just looking at it kind of from the outside, do you think he has a real chance to win these types of suits?
Well, they're very, very difficult lawsuits to win. Breach of contract, not as tough as like a defamation. Very difficult. But the thing is what we've seen so far and what's been out in the media, there seems to be some statements by the NCAA, at least internally, that don't necessarily seem to reflect, I guess the best things that have been said about McNair and whether they have any substance at all can be difficult. The thing that the NCAA and McNair might run into is, defamation. There's a publication requirement. You have to share it with another person. And if it's just two members inside the NCAA talking amongst themselves, it could become a question of, is it really that publication requirement? Because you're essentially just having an entity talking within itself about these negative things. So that might be an issue McNair runs into down the line.
And now McNair isn't here anymore, but USC as a whole also got hit with the bowl ban, the scholarships, which they are now finally getting back. Do they have any possibility of suing the NCAA for what happened in the past?
Well, there's a possibility of bringing an internal claim against the NCAA because the fact is that they're a member of the entity itself. So it kind of puts USC in a position of saying, hey, you didn't follow your own bylaws and your rules. And we all agreed that you would follow certain rules when you're going to be, administering college athletics and how we do this. So they can go internally and ask for some kind of, repercussion to come down, maybe even on the NCAA itself, or maybe to get something back. Or, if they go outside of that and they do a lawsuit in, civil litigation, I think that could be more difficult to win. And I don't necessarily know if they would have a case. But then again, all the documents aren't out and things are still, up in the air a bit.
It will be interesting to see how this changes the NCAA with so many investigations pending. Now we shift gears and send it over to Reed.
Thanks, Ken. Running through sports, we jump over to USC track and field. The number 7 men and number 8 women compete in 3 different events this weekend. USC is led by 6 All-Americans and will come back to the track after a week off. The Trojans will compete in the Florida Relays in Gainesville, the California Collegiate Invite in San Diego, and the Stanford Invitational in Palo Alto. USC hopes to divide and conquer as the competition will be fierce at all 3 meets. Keep an eye out for freshman standout Adoree Jackson, who won the Trojan Invitational last week and currently ranks 18th in the country.
As we spring out of March and into the month of April, it's time to light the torch. We start with women's lacrosse as the 7-3 Trojans face their conference rival Oregon. The Ducks beat USC in last year's conference tournament, and the women of Troy are looking to keep their 3-0 mark alive here in MPSF play.
We're excited. We're hungry right now, and I think, that's where we want to be. We're not satisfied with what we've done so far, and there's a lot of season left.
The pressure will be on Michaela Michael, who leads the nation in the draw circle this year. Caroline DeLira has recorded at least 4 points in each of her last 5 games, and USC enters this one following a long road trip. The top-ranked women of Troy carry a 6-match winning streak in their final road trip of the year against the Arizona schools. It's a warm weather test for the tennis squad that'll be much tougher.
Well, the altitude is definitely a lot different, so the balls tend to fly more. So luckily we're getting there early, so we'll be able to make our adjustments and just see what it's like to be ready for the matches.
USC has gotten some great performances from their 3 talented freshmen in conference play, paving the way for a much improved lineup, sparking these winning ways. And of course, our 8th-ranked men's baseball team has suddenly won 5 of their last 6 overall, but face an equally hot Arizona club. The Trojans will look to contain the top-hitting team in the conference that are tough to beat, especially in Tucson. USC has dropped each of his last 2 games on Friday nights and are hoping to avoid an early slip-up in this crucial road series that begins on Thursday. And the 8th-ranked and heavily battle-tested men's volleyball team brings the 3-game winning streak into tough games against Pepperdine and Stanford this week.
They're going to serve really well, so we need to be ready to pass the ball because they're going to be coming in hard. But other than that, I think we know what to expect from them. The first time we played them, we controlled them pretty well, so we just got to do the same thing.
The Trojans are starting to play like they did early in the year when they started 9-1 overall. Led by MPSF Player of the Week Andy Benish, the balanced Trojans looking to keep their swagger alive in some of these late-game situations. So there'll be plenty of USC sports this weekend, but now let's toss it over to Beverly, who goes in between the lines for this week's Tweets of the Week.
Thanks, Evan. I'm here at the Sports Pod. It's the most wonderful time of the year. That's right, it's March Madness. A majority of us are probably pretty upset about our brackets, but let's hear what some of our very own USC basketball players have to say about the games. We all know you got to do whatever it takes to watch your games. Freshman guard Malik Marquette said, "I'm sitting here watching the Gonzaga-UCLA game on my iPad like I ain't got 2 TVs in here." Speaking of UCLA, USC junior guard Chas Bryan says he wants all Pac teams to win. We got a deep conference. Unfortunately, UCLA's run ended at the Sweet 16, and so did Utah's. Arizona was the last Pac-12 team to fall and suffered a loss to Wisconsin in the Elite 8. Moving on to the Final Four, Marquette notes that Towns will jump hook you to death, but Okafor got way more in his arsenal. Towns better rim protector though, in reference to Kentucky center Karl Anthony Towns and Duke center Jahlil Okafor. My bracket's still hanging in there at the top 3.4%, but that's all for now. Best of luck with your brackets. Back to you, Ken.
On Sports Scene, we try to give some love to the club sports that may not get any attention or that people may not even know exist. And this week's Sports Scene, we go clubbing with men's soccer.
Josh Cohen here for Sports Scene. USC men's club soccer team just finished a 2-2 draw against a PLSA semi-pro team. Good performance in the first half, much better in the second half. Team is now 0-1-1 in the off-season. Of course, the season beginning in August, but off-season play's been pretty good. Team's getting some chemistry going, coached by Matt Wade, who's out with an injury today, but the team's looking good. Here from Matt Wade here. A 2-2 tie. What'd you see out there today?
I thought our second half was a lot better than the first half. We started off pretty slow. Ball movement wasn't great. Organization wasn't good. But after about 10-15 minutes, we settled in and really gave the other team a challenge.
Absolutely. What in particular stood out in that second half that the team did differently?
I think there was a lot more talking on the field. Most people tried to stand their positions a lot more. There's a lot more simple movements of the ball. We tried to stray away from the long ball as much and just play the open man, play what you see, a lot of shorter passes that really drew the other team in so we could exploit them later on.
Most definitely. And this is the off season for club soccer, but still a lot to improve upon before, next August. What do you think is the most important thing with this next month and a half?
Tactically and positionally, I think we could be a little bit more aware. That's what these scrimmages in the off season are for, and the few tournaments that we play. So that way the fall comes, everyone knows how everyone plays, there's a lot more chemistry and cohesion, and everyone understands the system.
Team will be in action again on April 10th in San Diego for a tournament, so make sure to check out on the USC men's club soccer team. I'm Josh Cohen for Sports Scene.
Thank you, Josh, for that report. I was actually baffled that USC doesn't have a men's soccer team at the D1 level, but keep fighting on there, men's soccer. And even though March is over, the madness of Sports Scene Trivia Crack Tournament continues to be absolutely insane. As a recap, we had Cinderella Story Evan, who downloaded Trivia Crack just before the tournament and had never played before, facing off against Jeremy, and executive producer Alyssa taking on Jacob Friedman. Smack talk was uttered all week, but when it came down to it, there were 2 epic matches.
This is for the win!
Yes! To the finals! Hoorah! The 8th seed!
From 0 to hero, how does it feel?
It was fantastic. Birdman gave me everything he could ask for, but Boudreaux, you don't count him out. You give him hope, and he comes in, boom, boom, and wins.
Will you continue speaking in the third person in the final?
Yes, sir. Boudreaux's alive.
Bergman, another top seed following upset to the machine that is Evan Budrovich. How does it feel?
Yeah. Dude's getting lucky. Can't explain it. Gave my best shot. I don't know where Punta Cana is, I've learned.
Talk about your goals in this offseason to improve for next year's tournament.
I'm just going to do a bunch of finger exercises. I'm going to try to get onto Jeopardy. I might even try my hand with Trivial Pursuit. I can't even believe I'm saying that.
Boom.
Down by a few points, nice comeback win there. What did it take to overcome adversity?
You know, it didn't really take much. I was taking on Jacobs. I've beaten him. I've been on a hot streak against Jacobs, so, you know, I wasn't really that worried.
Up by a point, that last question must have been brutal there that you missed. Now looking back at it, how important was that turn of the game?
I'm just here so I won't get fined.
Knowing you lost to Nakamoto as the higher seed, do you feel like the selection committee made a mistake this year?
I'm just here so I won't get fined.
So here it is for everyone. BFFs forever, Alyssa and Evan, will face off for the first and probably the only Trivia Crack Championship. There's no prize, just the ability to talk smack for the rest of your life. Will the magic of Boudreaux continue? Well, thanks for kicking it with us on a show you can trust. Tuning in next week is a must.
For Ken, I'm Evan. Just remember, keeping it in heaven.